The Atlantic Ocean is a restless thing. It breathes, it moves, it consumes, it preserves. It has swallowed empires, shattered ships, carried explorers to new worlds, and buried countless lives beneath its cold, indifferent surface. But among all its legends, all its furies, all its secrets, one story has survived longer, echoed louder, and stirred deeper emotions than almost any other. The mystery of the Mary Celeste. A story that begins not with disappearance, but with a dream. Not with a myth, but with a ship, a simple wooden sturdy brigantine originally known as Amazon. This is where our journey begins. The Mary Celeste did not begin its life as a haunted relic. It was built in 1861 in Nova Scotia during a period of maritime expansion in the North Atlantic, a time when wooden cargo ships still ruled the oceans and steam vessels were slowly rising to dominance. Originally named Amazon, the ship was meant to be fast, reliable, and profitable, a merchant vessel designed to move goods, not make history. But even in its early years, the Amazon carried an unsettling reputation. Its first captain died shortly after taking command. A later voyage ended in collision. Another ended in a storm so violent that the ship limped back to port heavily damaged. Nothing supernatural, not yet, but enough to earn whispers among sailors. Bad luck follows that ship still. In the world of 19th century seafaring, superstition was as common as rope and salt water. Many ships were called unlucky. Most simply proved otherwise in time. And for a while, Amazon did just that, until she was sold, repaired, renamed, and reborn as Mary Celeste. A new name, a new identity, a new destiny. But the sea remembers. To understand the voyage that would define the Mary Celeste forever, we must understand the world she sailed into. The year was 1872. The United States was healing from the Civil War. Trade with Europe was rising again. Shipping companies were eager to regain lost ground, and alcohol, industrial alcohol, was among the most valuable commodities crossing the Atlantic. The Mary Celeste was contracted to deliver 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol from New York to Genoa, Italy. A routine voyage, nothing unusual. But what makes this voyage extraordinary is not the cargo, but the people who stepped on board. People whose lives would soon dissolve into mist. Benjamin Spooner Briggs was not the kind of man who made mistakes. Born into a respected seafaring family, Briggs was experienced, disciplined, religious, insightful, the kind of captain sailors trusted with their lives. At 37 years old, he had commanded several vessels and earned a reputation for caution, integrity, and calm leadership. He was not reckless, he was not superstitious, he was not the type of captain who would abandon a ship without reason. And it is exactly this reputation that makes the Mary Celeste mystery so haunting. Because if Briggs abandoned the ship, something must have convinced him that staying aboard was worse. But what? That question will follow us through every chapter of this story. Before accepting the voyage, Briggs made a decision that would change the emotional weight of the case forever. It was not uncommon. Sarah was a calm, thoughtful woman, deeply devoted to her husband. On the morning of departure, witnesses observed the family, Sarah holding Sophia in her arms, Briggs overseeing last-minute preparations, the crew working efficiently on deck. Everything seemed ordinary, but the presence of a child on board adds a chilling layer to the mystery. Whatever happened later, it didn't spare anyone, not even little Sophia. One of the strongest arguments against theories of mutiny or violence lies in the composition of Briggs' crew. The men were personally vetted by Briggs, known for discipline, of good reputation, sober, and experienced. Names like Albert Richardson, first mate, Andrew Gilling, Volkert, Lorenzen, Arian Martins. Not a single one had a criminal history or a record of insubordination. These were not men who would murder their captain or steal a ship, and yet they vanished completely. Not a coat, not a log entry, not a trace. On the morning of November 7th, the Mary Celeste departed from New York Harbor. Weather.com/winds moderate, crew, fully healthy, cargo, sealed ship, seaworthy. Captain Briggs wrote a calm letter to his mother the day before departing. He expressed optimism. No signs to fear, no sense of danger. These letters, still preserved today, are some of the last words Briggs ever wrote. The Mary Celeste set sail toward the open ocean. The journey should have taken about a month, but the ship never reached Italy, and the people aboard were never seen again. The final entry in the ship's log was dated November 25, 1872, near the western coast of the Azores. The log showed steady weather, normal navigation, no signs of distress, no storms approaching, no abnormalities. Everything was routine. Then silence, no distress calls, no notes, no warnings, just nothing. This normalcy before the void is one of the most chilling elements of the entire case. The story transforms from voyage to myth on a single day. December 4, 1872. The British ship Dei Gratia, under Captain David Morehouse, spotted a vessel drifting erratically in the mid-Atlantic. Its sails were partially set, its course was irregular. It seemed empty. When the Dei Gratia approached, crewmen recognized the ship. It's the Mary Celeste. This was the moment when the greatest maritime mystery of all time emerged from the waves. Because what the crew of the Dei Gratia found aboard was something no seafarer had ever seen before. A ship alive, but without a soul. A body without a heartbeat. A ghost made of wood. The moment the Dei Gratia spotted the Mary Celeste drifting alone in the Atlantic, an uneasy tension spread across the deck. Two sailors of the 19th century, a vessel moving without a visible crew was more than dangerous, it was unnatural. Captain Morehouse ordered a closer approach. As the Dei Gratia drew nearer, sailors noted unsettling details. The Mary Celeste's movement was erratic, like a body without muscles. The sails were torn in places but not destroyed. The ship looked abandoned but not ruined. No one appeared on deck. No distress signals were hoisted. A ship in trouble usually shouted for help through flags or flares. The Mary Celeste said nothing. It simply drifted as if waiting. When the gap between the two vessels closed, the truth became undeniable. There were no figures, no crew, no captain, no movements on deck, just empty railings and silent ropes. One of Morehouse's officers turned to him and said the sentence that would echo through history, "Sir, there's no one there." Morehouse stared across the waves. Troubled, he knew Captain Briggs personally. They had shared dinners, conversations, and professional respect. For Briggs to abandon his ship voluntarily, impossible. And yet here it was, the Mary Celeste, alive but soulless. Morehouse sent a small team to board the vessel. First Mate Oliver DeVoe, Seaman Charles Lund, a few others. Armed and cautious, climbing the railings of a deserted ship is one of the most unsettling moments a sailor can experience. Their boots touched the damp deck, and the first thing they noticed was the unnatural silence. Ships make noise. Ropes creak, wood shifts. Footsteps echo. Voices carry. But aboard the Mary Celeste, there was nothing but the wind and the hollow groan of empty planks. A ship without people feels wrong. It feels like entering a home where the lights are on, but no one lives there. The boarding team spread out across the deck and quickly noticed something. The Mary Celeste was seaworthy. Not sinking, not flooded, only modest bilge water. Completely normal, not damaged beyond minor wear. The hull was intact. The masts stood firm. The cargo was stable. This fact, the ship's solid condition, is one of the most baffling aspects of the mystery. No rational captain abandons a ship that is still safe. Especially not a seasoned captain with his wife on board with his small daughter, on board with a trusted crew with no signs of immediate danger. Something must have created fear, a fear strong enough to override judgment, or so sudden that no one had time to react properly. This single detail reframed everything. They believed they had a reason to leave. The absence of the lifeboat is both. In the captain's cabin, the boarding party discovered the ship's chronometer missing, the sextant missing, some navigational documents missing. This initially suggested deliberate evacuation, but it also added layers of confusion. If Briggs took the instruments, why leave behind his sword, his clothing, his chest, his personal possessions? Briggs was not an impulsive man. He would not leave valuables behind unless the situation demanded immediate action. This raises the terrifying possibility. They intended to return quickly, but something prevented it. Something irreversible. The sails were partially set. Some were torn. Ropes hung loosely. Others flapped in the wind. This indicated one of two possibilities. 1. Someone had tried to maneuver the ship shortly before abandoning it, or 2. The ship drifted for days without human control, allowing weather to damage the rigging. Both interpretations left the same disturbing reality. No one had been on the ship for a long time, and yet nothing aboard indicated that the crew had been in danger. The boarding party inspected the cargo, 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. To their surprise, 9 barrels were empty. This discovery would later fuel countless theories and endless exaggerations, but in reality, the empty barrels were made of a different wood, red oak, naturally porous and known to leak. No explosion, no fire, no smell of burning. Still, the presence of leaked alcohol vapor, even without explosion, could have created a muffled boom, a rush of fumes, a frightening chemical smell. This possibility will return later in the documentary because it forms the backbone of one of the most plausible modern theories. Another confusing clue awaited below. The deck pump was dismantled. The bilge had more water than expected, though not dangerously high. If the pump clogged, common with certain cargoes, the crew may have believed the ship was taking on more water than it truly was. A misjudgment, a false alarm, a terrifying misunderstanding. A ship that appeared stable on deck might have appeared unstable below. This kind of error could push even a seasoned captain into a temporary evacuation. But again, why not return to the ship afterward? That question haunts every theory. The last entry in the logbook was calm and routine. At 5 a.m., we were 6 miles northeast of Santa Maria. No fear, no warning, no strange behavior, just standard navigation notes. The log's normal tone makes the disappearance even more baffling. Nothing inside that book suggests panic, distress, threat, sickness, storm, mutiny, danger, which leads us to a chilling conclusion. Whatever happened to the Mary Celeste happened after the final log entry, and happened fast. When the Dei Gratia crew finished their inspection, they had a list of contradictions: a seaworthy ship but abandoned with no signs of struggle, and no reason to flee with a missing lifeboat but no sign of returning with instruments removed, but personal belongings left behind with calm log entries. But total disappearance after a paradox, a ghost in broad daylight, a mystery born not from chaos but from order. And that, more than anything else, is why the Mary Celeste became one of the most enduring enigmas in human history. When the Dei Gratia towed the Mary Celeste into Gibraltar on December 12, 1872, few could imagine that the story would ignite one of the most controversial maritime investigations in history. A drifting ship was rare. An abandoned ship was extraordinary. An abandoned ship in perfect condition, that was unheard of. As the vessel entered the harbor, whispers spread among sailors, traders, and officials. A ghost ship. What happened to the people? Why is it empty? Questions hung in the air like fog. People rushed to the docks to see the infamous vessel. The Mary Celeste had sailed into Gibraltar without a crew, but with an audience. The man assigned to investigate the case was Frederick Solly Flood, Attorney General of Gibraltar. His reputation preceded him. Meticulous, rigid, sometimes imaginative to the point of excess, often suspicious of everything and everyone. Flood's instinct was clear from the beginning. He believed a crime had been committed, not an accident, not a misunderstanding, not a tragedy, a crime. And the first people he suspected were the most obvious. The crew of the Dei Gratia. To Flood, their discovery of the Mary Celeste was simply too convenient. He was determined to find evidence of foul play, whether it existed or not. The investigation began with aggressive questioning. Captain Morehouse, First Mate DeVoe, and others were interrogated relentlessly. Why were you near the Mary Celeste? How did you find her? What condition was she in? Did you remove anything? Did you alter anything? Did you encounter the crew? Flood looked for inconsistencies, contradictions, signs of guilt, but the more he pushed, the more coherent their story remained. Their chronology aligned, their accounts matched, their behavior made sense. They had no motive to murder anyone. No evidence placed them near the Mary Celeste before the discovery. Yet Flood refused to let go. He believed there had to be a crime, and he insisted on finding one. Flood ordered an exhaustive inspection of the Mary Celeste. Decks, cabins, cargo hold, rigging, hull, crew quarters. Investigators searched for anything that could suggest mutiny, murder, piracy, sabotage, or a staged abandonment. What they found was nothing. No blood, no broken weapons, no torn clothing, no overturned furniture, no knife marks, no signs of struggle, no evidence of theft. There was zero indication of human violence aboard the ship. This should have closed the case. But Flood was just getting started. One detail seemed promising. Captain Briggs's sword had faint discolorations on its blade. Flood immediately declared, "This is blood." But tests were primitive in the 1800s. Later, examination revealed the marks were simple rust, common for a sword exposed to maritime moisture. Yet, in Flood's mind, the stain became part of the narrative he was constructing. A violent act, a cover-up, a stolen ship. Each assumption built upon the last, regardless of evidence. Flood was particularly troubled by the 9 empty barrels discovered in the cargo hold. He theorized. The crew drank the industrial alcohol, physically impossible, as it is poison. They became drunk and violent again. Impossible. They would have died. They mutinied and murdered the Briggs family, not supported by any evidence. They escaped in the lifeboat, no sign of this. Every variation of this theory fell apart under scrutiny. Still, Flood insisted on linking the leaking barrels to foul play. But the real explanation was simple. Those 9 barrels were made of red oak, a wood known for leaking more than white oak. They weren't tampered with, they weren't used, they weren't part of any crime. Flood was chasing ghosts. Unable to prove murder by outsiders, Flood turned to the idea of an internal mutiny. Perhaps, he reasoned, the crew turned against Briggs. They murdered the family. They escaped in the lifeboat. A storm later drowned them. But this theory collapsed immediately. Briggs chose his crew carefully. No crew member had a record of violence. No evidence of struggle existed. No motive emerged. No bodies or wreckage supported this idea. Yet, in the early days of the investigation, this fictional mutiny filled newspaper headlines. Flood's obsession with a crime had inadvertently fed the mystery. Ship inspectors reported the hull was sound. No explosion occurred. No fire took place. The bilge water was not excessive. The deck pump malfunctioned, but not catastrophically. The cargo was intact. The ship was stable. They repeatedly stated, there is no reason this ship would be abandoned. But Flood rejected the findings. He insisted on a criminal explanation. In doing so, he transformed the Mary Celeste from a maritime anomaly into a full-fledged mystery. Eventually, after weeks of interrogations and inspections, Flood was forced to accept the truth. There was no evidence of crime, violence, mutiny, theft, piracy, or conspiracy. The official verdict was delivered. Ship found abandoned, cause unknown. It was the only conclusion investigators could ethically make. But the lack of answers didn't close the case, it expanded it, because nothing fuels a legend more than silence. When the inquiry ended, the Mary Celeste transitioned from incident to enigma. Writers, journalists, sailors, and storytellers began filling the gaps with imagination. Flood's suspicions, even though unproven, gave the public fuel for ghost stories, tales of sea monsters, mutiny yarns, supernatural theories, and early suggestions of strange forces in the Atlantic. The Mary Celeste became the archetype of a ghost ship, and paradoxically, it was not the ocean that created the legend, it was the attempt to explain it. When logic failed, myth took over, and this was only the beginning. After the Gibraltar inquiry closed with the unsatisfying verdict, cause unknown, the world did not move on. Instead, interest in the Mary Celeste intensified. Historians revisited the case. Scientists reanalyzed the evidence. Oceanographers reinterpreted the environment. Psychologists studied the human factors. And modern technology allowed a deeper re-examination of the clues. Every generation tried to answer the question, why would an experienced captain abandon a perfectly good ship? This question became the engine behind dozens of theories, some plausible, others bizarre, and together they formed the foundation of the modern fascination with the Mary Celeste. One of the most discussed and scientifically credible theories involves the industrial alcohol cargo aboard the Mary Celeste. Remember, 1,701 barrels, 9 leaking due to red oak porosity, flammable vapors, a sealed hold, heat and pressure variations under the right conditions. These elements can create pockets of vapor, sudden bursts of expanding gases, loud booming sounds, flames that flash without leaving burn marks. This leads to the idea of a false explosion, a pressure burst strong enough to frighten the crew, but not damaging enough to leave physical evidence. Scientists in modern experiments have confirmed a vapor explosion can occur without scorching the ship and without leaving visible marks. The theory suggests Briggs smelled fumes or heard a muffled boom. He feared a catastrophic explosion. He ordered everyone into the lifeboat temporarily. They planned to return after the fumes dissipated. But the towline snapped or the weather shifted. The Mary Celeste sailed away. The lifeboat drifted until it capsized or was lost. This theory explains the missing lifeboat, the removal of instruments, the lack of damage, the sudden abandonment, the disappearance of the entire crew. But it has one major flaw. Why didn't they secure a proper towline? This remains a haunting gap in the theory. Another respected theory involves the malfunctioning deck pump. The Mary Celeste pump was found partially dismantled, suggesting the crew had been trying to fix it. At the same time, the bilge water level was higher than normal. Visibility into the hold was limited. The cargo could have shifted. The ship might have felt slightly heavier. These conditions could create the illusion that the ship was taking on more water than it actually was. So Briggs may have believed the ship was sinking, or that the structural integrity was compromised, or that they were moments from disaster. If Briggs sincerely believed the Mary Celeste was doomed, he might have ordered a temporary evacuation, fully intending to return. Again, the key problem: the ship was not in danger. The fear was based on false clues, a tragic misinterpretation, a normal ship mistaken for a dying one. Although no major storms were recorded near the Mary Celeste's last logged position, small-scale weather events could have frightened the crew. Possibly scenarios include their sudden waterspout. Waterspouts can create roaring sounds, throw water violently onto a ship, suck objects upward, to terrify even experienced sailors. A rogue wave, even a moderate rogue wave, could flood the deck, loosen equipment, feel like the ship was moments from capsizing. A storm that missed the recording instruments. Not every storm leaves a historical trace. Small squalls can move quickly and disappear. These scenarios could explain the dismantled pump, the open hatches, water on the deck, panic among the crew. Again, the flaw remains. Why leave a functioning ship for a lifeboat? A lifeboat is always more dangerous than a deck. One theory focuses on navigational instruments. Briggs's chronometer may have been miscalibrated. If it was off, he could have misjudged longitude, distance from land, or proximity to reefs. If Briggs believed he was dangerously close to the Azores, he might have feared running aground. In such a scenario, he may have slowed the ship, hove to, or temporarily evacuated until visibility improved. If the small boat's tow rope broke, the Mary Celeste could have drifted out of reach. This theory fits the known timeline, but again, it fails to explain why such an experienced captain made a catastrophic decision. Many modern psychologists believe the explanation is simple: panic. Humans under stress, especially at sea, can make irrational decisions. Factors like the leaking alcohol, strange smells, the malfunctioning pump, poor visibility into the hold. Minor weather disturbances, confusing sounds from the cargo could combine to create a moment of collective fear. A moment where even a brilliant captain might think, "We must get off this ship for a few minutes." The tragedy would come from one simple mistake: an unsecured rope, one gust of wind, one wave, and the Mary Celeste drifted away forever. Some have insisted on a pirate attack, but this theory collapses instantly. No valuables were stolen, no cargo was missing, no signs of violence, no damage to the ship. Piracy in that region was minimal at the time. The pirates who take no loot theory is one of the weakest ever proposed. It survives only because people love dramatic villains. These theories belong more to imagination than history, but they persist. Giant squid attack, sea serpent encounter, whirlpools or ocean vortices, ghost or spirit intervention, curses, disappearances into other dimensions. None have any evidence, but their existence reveals something important. The human mind prefers fantasy to the discomfort of incomplete knowledge. One modern approach avoids grand explanations. Instead, it argues there was no single event, just many small problems that created one fatal decision. For example, the pump malfunctioned, alcohol vapors leaked, weather conditions shifted, the ship behaved sluggishly. The crew smelled dangerous fumes, Briggs feared explosion or sinking. He evacuated temporarily, the rope snapped, the crew drifted away. The ship sailed on a tragedy created not by one cause but by 10 small causes aligning at once. Despite all the theories, all the debates, all the documentaries, all the books, all the speculation, everyone agrees on one chilling truth. Once the crew boarded the lifeboat, something prevented them from returning. Whether it was a broken rope, a sudden wind shift, rough waves, bad luck, or death in open water, the moment the Mary Celeste drifted ahead without them, their fate was sealed. And the ship, that wooden shell, became their only tombstone. Sensationalist, eager for attention, willing to stretch the truth. The Mary Celeste was the perfect story: an empty ship, a missing crew, no evidence, no answers, a dramatic setting, and endless room for speculation. Journalists published exaggerated accounts, invented details, emotional narratives, interpretations far from the facts. They wrote about bloodstains that never existed, murder weapons that were never found, violent struggles that left no marks, and pools of blood that no witness reported. Each article added a layer of myth, and the world devoured it. In 1884, a young medical student and aspiring writer named Arthur Conan Doyle published a short story titled J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. It was a fictionalized retelling of the Mary Celeste incident with a new name, Marie Celeste, and a dramatic tale of murder, survival, and conspiracy. The story went viral. Readers believed it was based on facts. Newspapers reprinted it as a real account. Sailors repeated it as truth. Doyle's story invented new events, created villains, added supernatural elements, distorted real details, and cemented the Mary Celeste as a ghost ship. Ironically, Doyle himself would later create Sherlock Holmes, a character known for logic and reason, yet his early success came from a story built on embellishment and fantasy. This fictional tale became so influential that many people still believe parts of it today. The late 19th century was an era obsessed with spiritualism, seances, ghosts, the supernatural, occult societies, mysterious deaths, unsolved cases. The Mary Celeste arrived at the perfect moment. Victorian culture embraced anything that blurred the line between fact and the unknown. Writers saw in the Mary Celeste a moral tale, a supernatural omen, a warning against greed, a metaphor for the unpredictability of life, a symbol of the vast, unknowable sea. And the public loved it. By the early 1900s, the Mary Celeste had become a ghost ship, a symbol of bad luck, a metaphor for unfinished stories, a cautionary tale for sailors, material for dark imagination. Common myths began to take shape. MYTH, the ship was found with food still warm on the table. This never happened. MYTH, the ship's log ended mid-sentence. False. It ended normally. Myth, every clock on board had stopped at the same moment. Invented by writers. MYTH, the crew's belongings were untouched. True, but exaggerated. Myth, a sea monster dragged the crew away. Pure fiction. MYTH, the ship was cursed. Superstition, not history. Yet these myths persisted because they offered something reality could not. Satisfaction. Stories crave closure. The Mary Celeste offered none, so storytellers created their own. Throughout the 20th century, the Mary Celeste appeared in films draped in suspense, framed as horror twisted into supernatural thrillers, novels filled with romance and tragedy, set against ghostly seas, built on the tension of the unknown, television documentaries, dramatic reenactments, speculative programs about mysterious disappearances, paintings, artists depicted lonely decks, abandoned cabins, drifting sails, miscovered horizons. Music composers and bands used the name Mary Celeste to symbolize emptiness, loss, mystery, drifting beyond reach. By mid-century, the Mary Celeste had evolved beyond a historical event. It became an idea, a metaphor, a symbol. Before the Mary Celeste's ghost ship stories existed, but they were mostly legends with no real cases behind them. After the Mary Celeste, that changed. It became the template for every story of a deserted vessel, every fictional ship found drifting, every maritime mystery with no survivors. Today, when people hear ghost ship, the Mary Celeste is the first image that comes to mind. It defined an entire genre. The Mary Celeste did not disappear in the Bermuda Triangle, but in the mid-20th century, as the triangle myth exploded in popularity, writers began drawing parallels. Mysterious disappearances, intact ships with missing crews, theories of strange forces, supernatural speculation. Because the Mary Celeste was the most famous ghost ship, it became retroactively connected to the triangle's mythology not by history, but by narrative similarity. This connection helped both stories grow, feeding a cultural appetite for the unexplained. The truth is simple. The Mary Celeste survived because the complete truth died with the crew. It is a rare combination of factors: a ship intact, a crew gone, no evidence of violence, no evidence of disaster, no final message, no bodies found, no lifeboat recovered. The perfect mystery, a canvas without answers, and humanity cannot resist a blank space. In time, the Mary Celeste stopped being a tragedy and became a story, a metaphor, a piece of folklore, a cautionary tale, a puzzle that can never be solved. But behind the legend, we must remember, these were real people: Briggs, Sarah, little Sophia, 7 sailors, all lost, not monsters, not ghosts, not symbols, humans. And that is what makes the legend haunting. Because beneath the stories lies a heartbreaking truth: real lives vanished, and the world turned them into myth. For more than 150 years, the story of the Mary Celeste has held humanity in a strange emotional grip, not because of violence, not because of tragedy, not because of monsters, pirates, or storms, but because it touches something deep inside us, something older than science, older than navigation, older even than civilization. The fear of disappearing without explanation, of vanishing into silence. The Mary Celeste confronts us with the possibility that we can be alive, intelligent, experienced, responsible, and still be swallowed not by waves but by the unknown. A deserted ship is far more disturbing than a sunken one. A sunken ship has a cause. A sunken ship has victims. A sunken ship has closure. But a ship found intact, drifting as if waiting for its crew to return, that speaks to a deeper, more primal fear. It feels like a house with dinner still warm on the table, a playground with toys abandoned mid-game, a chair still rocking, a lamp still lit, but no one home. It represents interrupted life, a story without a final chapter, a human presence erased, a moment frozen in time. Empty ships echo with the ghosts of possibility. The Mary Celeste is the loudest echo of all. Most tragedies provide physical evidence: remains, wreckage, destruction, something that confirms what happened. The Mary Celeste offers none. The crew did not leave behind clothing, notes, distress signals, blood, bodies, or footprints of struggle. The complete lack of human remains forces the mind to fill the vacuum with imagination, and imagination is often more frightening than reality. The Mary Celeste is not a story of death. It is a story of absence. Absence is harder to understand than death. Harder to accept, harder to make peace with. Between the final log entry on November 25th and the discovery on December 4th, 9 days passed. 9 days of complete silence. No distress call, no message in a bottle, no journal entry, no source, no clues. 9 days in which the crew lived their final moments unseen by the world, unheard by history. It is this silence that gives the Mary Celeste its ghostly quality. Because silence is not empty. Silence is full of everything we cannot know. Psychologists have long understood that the mind despises uncertainty. We crave causes, reasons, explanations, structure, logic, answers. The Mary Celeste gives us none. And when the mind cannot find certainty, it invents meaning in the shadows. This is why the story triggered paranormal theories, science fiction fantasies, conspiracies, supernatural explanations, and dramatic retellings. The human mind would rather believe in sea monsters than believe in nothing. Unlike other maritime mysteries, the Mary Celeste is intimate. It involves a father, a mother, a child, a trusted crew. These were real people with real dreams. Briggs was a devoted husband. Sarah Briggs was a loving mother. Sophia was only 2 years old. Their absence hits harder because it erases a family, not just a crew. We picture Sophia's small shoes in the cabin, Sarah's clothing folded neatly, Briggs's chronometer missing from its shelf. These tiny details humanize the tragedy in a way no myth can replace. The Mary Celeste is more than a ship. It is a symbol of the fragility of life, the unpredictability of the world, the limits of human understanding. It reminds us that even the experienced can make fatal mistakes, even the cautious can be caught off guard, even the strong can be lost without trace. In this way, the Mary Celeste becomes a universal metaphor, a metaphor for the truth that not everything in life comes with answers. The ocean has seen everything. The birth of continents, the death of civilizations, the rise and fall of ships, storms that erased entire fleets, calm seas that hid unspeakable tragedies. But the ocean shares nothing. It does not reveal secrets. It does not testify. It does not confess. The Mary Celeste is one of the ocean's cruel jokes. A mystery preserved perfectly, but with its explanation drowned forever. The sea keeps the truth. We keep the questions. Even in an era of satellites, sonar mapping, and scientific precision, the Mary Celeste remains unsolved. And that unsettles us. Because if a small wooden brigantine in the 19th century can disappear without explanation, then what else can vanish? What else lies beyond our understanding? The Mary Celeste is a reminder that mystery is not a relic of the past. It is part of the present. The unknown has not left us. It is still here, lurking beneath the waves. At the heart of the Mary Celeste's power is an emotional truth. It forces us to confront the limits of human knowledge. Some mysteries will never be solved. Some disappearances will never be explained. Some stories will never be complete. The Mary Celeste is not frightening because it is supernatural. It is frightening because it is possible, because it is human, because it is real. The most haunting mysteries are the ones that could happen again. And the Mary Celeste reminds us that the world is far bigger and far more unpredictable than we like to believe. Some stories fade with time, some survive for a while, and a rare few become part of the world's mythology. The Mary Celeste did something even more extraordinary. It crossed the boundary between history and culture. It became a symbol, a metaphor, a literary archetype, a cinematic trope, a philosophical question, a global legend. The ship that drifted empty across the Atlantic would go on to drift through every corner of human creativity. Writers were the first to transform the mystery into myth. One newspaper's 1870s, 1880s journalists extended, embellished, and sometimes invented details. Each article pushed the story further from the truth, yet the emotional impact grew stronger. To Arthur Conan Doyle, 1884, Doyle's fictionalized account became a phenomenon. Though altered, it cemented key mythological elements: the eerie atmosphere, the sense of a supernatural presence, the idea of a cursed or doomed ship. Ironically, Doyle, creator of the hyperlogical Sherlock Holmes, was responsible for mythologizing one of history's greatest unsolved cases. 3 subsequent novelists throughout the 1900s and 2000s, writers continued to reinterpret the Mary Celeste. Gothic novels, adventure epics, detective stories, supernatural thrillers, psychological dramas, maritime anthologies. The Mary Celeste became shorthand for a mystery the world cannot solve. The Mary Celeste quickly found its place on screen. The Mystery of the Mary Celeste, 1935, starring Bela Lugosi. This film blended fact with horror fiction. It portrayed madness, violence, and ghostly atmosphere, solidifying the ship's role as a cinematic ghost vessel. Later documentaries and dramatizations throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. The story appeared in BBC documentaries, History Channel specials, Discovery Channel reconstructions, independent films, fictional horror films set at sea. Visual media loved the Mary Celeste because it offered empty decks, drifting sails, objects frozen in time, a missing crew, a perfect mystery. The imagery is inherently cinematic. A ship with no people is one of the most visually haunting scenes imaginable. The Mary Celeste shaped countless works indirectly. Ghost ships in fiction often imitate its structure, abandoned but intact, quiet but unsettling, orderly but wrong, full of clues but empty of answers. From treasure hunting films to supernatural dramas, whenever a vessel is discovered drifting at sea, the Mary Celeste's shadow lingers behind the narrative. The trope it created includes the ominous drifting ship, the missing crew, the eerie silence of a vessel without people, the unbroken table settings, the logbook ending abruptly, the mystery that invites endless theories even modern video games and novels reference. A Mary Celeste moment, a shorthand for any inexplicable disappearance. Musicians and visual artists found deep emotional themes within the story. In music, songs and classical compositions used the Mary Celeste as imagery for loneliness, drifting through life, unresolved grief, mystery, abandonment, the sea as a metaphor for the unconscious mind. The ship has been referenced in rock albums, folk ballads, symphonic pieces, ambient compositions. In fine art, painters portray ghostly ships in twilight seas, empty decks under stormy skies, cabins holding silent memories, the contrast between presence and absence. Sculptors and installation artists use the ship as a motif for loss, unanswered questions, the human tendency to seek meaning in chaos. In every art form, the Mary Celeste becomes a question disguised as a vessel. The Mary Celeste's legend grew during the exact period when the Bermuda Triangle myth exploded. Although the ship did not disappear in the triangle, writers in the mid-20th century began drawing connections. Mysterious vanishings, crews gone without explanation, ships found drifting without passengers, supernatural forces of the Atlantic. The Mary Celeste became a prototype for triangle narratives. Its drama, its emptiness, and its unsolved nature fit perfectly into the aesthetic of unexplained disappearances. Because of this, many documentaries and books lump the Mary Celeste into Atlantic mysteries, implicitly tying it to the triangle archetype even if not geographically true. The ship became a reference point, a measuring stick for every unexplained maritime disappearance that followed. Beyond culture and entertainment, the Mary Celeste seeped into university lectures, philosophical discussions, psychological analysis, debates about uncertainty, reflections on human fear. Professors and scholars use it to discuss 1. The illusion of control. How experts, even experienced captains, can make fatal decisions based on incomplete data. 2. The nature of absence. Why the lack of evidence creates more psychological pressure than the presence of tragedy. 3. The limits of human knowledge. How some answers remain permanently out of reach. 4. The power of narrative. How societies fill gaps in understanding with stories, myths, and assumptions. 5. The ocean as metaphor. The infinite sea becomes the symbol of everything we do not and cannot fully know. The Mary Celeste transformed into a philosophical tool as much as a historical case. As decades passed, the Mary Celeste spread worldwide. Translated into dozens of languages, it became a shared cultural story. From Japan to Brazil, Germany to South Africa, Canada to Australia, the ship is known not as a tragedy but as a riddle. Every culture adds its own flavor. Some emphasize the supernatural, others focus on the human tragedy. Some treat it as cautionary, others as poetic. The mystery evolves depending on who tells it. Like a ship drifting across oceans, the story drifted across cultures. Why this ship? Why this story? Why not countless other maritime disappearances? Because the Mary Celeste has the perfect ingredients: a ship intact, a crew gone, a child on board, no signs of violence, no signs of catastrophe, no answers, no closure, no final message, and a world desperate for meaning. It is the purest form of mystery. No more, no less. No clue solid enough to solve it. No evidence clear enough to dismiss it. No ending definitive enough to close it. A riddle frozen in time. A silence that speaks louder than truth. The Mary Celeste didn't just survive history, it transcended it. At the core of its cultural echo, the Mary Celeste reflects our fascination with the unknown, our fear of disappearing, our desire for answers, our need for narrative. Our struggle with uncertainty is not only a maritime mystery, it is a psychological one. A symbol of everything that slips through our fingers. Everything we cannot grasp. Everything the universe keeps hidden. And that is why the Mary Celeste continues to haunt us, because it is not just a ship, it is a question without an answer. And humanity cannot resist a question that refuses to die. The Mary Celeste is not just a maritime mystery, it has become a symbol of the deepest and darkest parts of our emotional landscape. A symbol of uncertainty, disappearance, fragility, loss, the limits of human understanding. Most historical events remain confined to the past, but the Mary Celeste continues to live in art, writing, speculation, and imagination, because it speaks to something timeless and universal. It speaks to fear, it speaks to absence, it speaks to the unknown, that silent force that shadows every human life. A story without an ending is unsettling. A life without closure is unbearable. Humans are wired to seek patterns, conclusions, final chapters, explanations that tie everything together. The Mary Celeste denies us all of these. It is the ultimate unfinished story, a narrative that continues but can never be completed. That incompletion becomes symbolic of our own fears. What if our questions go unanswered? What if our lives end without explanation? What if our stories remain unfinished? The Mary Celeste becomes a mirror reflecting our anxieties about mortality and meaning. Disappearance. True disappearance is one of the most psychologically disturbing concepts known to humanity. We fear dying unknown, vanishing without witnesses, being erased, leaving no trace. The Mary Celeste presents the nightmare scenario. A group of people left their belongings, their tools, their clothes, their world, and stepped into nothingness. They vanished from the timeline of history as if they never existed. No wreckage, no remains, no last message, no narrative, just silence. This chilling emptiness turns the Mary Celeste into a metaphor for existential erasure. Sarah Briggs was not the only woman on board. 2-year-old Sophia was with her parents on this voyage, and that fact intensifies everything. The presence of a child amplifies the tragedy, the emotional depth, the symbolic resonance, the sense of injustice. A child disappearing is something the human psyche struggles to accept. It transforms the Mary Celeste from a maritime incident into an emotional wound, a wound that refuses to heal. Imagine walking into a child's quarters and finding toys left in place. Small clothes folded neatly, a blanket untouched, a corner where a child once slept, but the child is gone. That emptiness is what the Mary Celeste represents, not chaos, not destruction, but interruption, a sudden, permanent pause. Life was happening then, it stopped mid-sentence, and the ocean erased the rest. Throughout human history, the sea has represented the frontier between the known and the unknown. Life and death, safety and danger, reality and myth. The Mary Celeste is the embodiment of that frontier. The sea swallowed not the ship but the story. It absorbed the truth, the witnesses, the last moments, the voices, the fear, the fate of 10 people. The ocean is the perfect antagonist because it is not evil, it is indifferent. Its silence is what makes the story terrifying. The Mary Celeste also serves as a symbol of human vulnerability. It represents the uncomfortable truth that even the wise can misjudge, even the strong can fall, even the prepared can be undone, even the experienced can fail. Captain Briggs was an exceptional sailor. His crew was handpicked, his ship was seaworthy, and yet something happened that he could not overcome. This fuels the symbolic meaning of the story. No matter how far humanity advances, there will always be forces beyond our control. Stepping onto an empty deck, as the crew of the Dei Gratia did, is not merely surreal, it's psychologically destabilizing. Our minds depend on context. When we see a table, we expect people. When we see food, we expect someone to eat it. When we see a ship, we expect a crew. Remove the people but leave everything else intact, and the mind begins to fill the void with fear. The empty deck becomes a stage prepared for actors who never appear. It becomes a void, a missing chapter, a vanished world. It is a floating metaphor for the truth. Life can drift, life can slip away, life can end without answers. Despite hundreds of investigations, despite modern scientific analysis, despite countless theories, no one can explain the disappearance with absolute certainty, and that is the key to its symbolism. We hold on to mysteries because they hold on to us. They remind us that the world is bigger than our knowledge, nature is stronger than our predictions, life is more fragile than we admit, and some truths will forever be beyond reach. The Mary Celeste is not frightening because it is supernatural. It is frightening because it is possible, and that possibility reflects our deepest human fears, that we too could vanish without explanation. Before we attempt to reconstruct the final hours of the Mary Celeste, one truth must be acknowledged. No one knows what happened. No journal survives, no message remains, no survivor returned to tell the tale. But using the ship's condition, the weather reports, the state of the cargo, nautical science, the crew's experience, and modern reconstructions, we can create the most plausible scenario. Not a fantasy, not a supernatural tale, but a rational reconstruction of what might have unfolded. This is not fiction. It is analysis woven into narrative. The last log entry was made on November 25, 1872, 5 a.m. The Mary Celeste was 6 miles from Santa Maria Island, Azores, under clear weather, navigating normally, showing no signs of crisis. Everything was routine, yet sometime between November 25th and December 4th, 9 days, the crew vanished. We now walk into that silent gap. Although no major storms were recorded, the region around the Azores is known for sudden squalls, sharp gusts, unpredictable winds, isolated waterspouts. Even minor events can appear catastrophic to sailors. Strange sounds from the hold, sudden changes in temperature, pressure shifts within cargo barrels. Small events can spark fear. Fear can spark action. Action can spark tragedy. The most significant physical clue remains: 9 barrels leaked. Modern experiments show that industrial alcohol creates explosive vapors, expands under heat, produces booming noises when pressure escapes, can emit sudden bursts of fumes. Imagine the scene in the hold. The cargo begins emitting vapor. The air becomes harsh, chemical, biting. A sudden humph echoes. Not a fire, not an explosion, but a pressure burst, a frightening sound, a smell of danger. Even experienced sailors can panic if they believe the cargo is about to explode. Captain Briggs would not ignore such sounds or smells. He would open the hatch, inspect the pump, test the bilge, check for leaks, analyze the situation. Here is where the problem grows. The pump is malfunctioning, it is partially dismantled, does not provide reliable readings. The bilge water is higher than normal, not dangerous but possibly misleading. The hold is full of fumes, enough to trigger fear of ignition. Cargo is shifting, creating unnatural thumps and vibrations. Briggs may have concluded the ship might explode, or the hull might be compromised. He had his wife and child on board. That changes every decision. Imagine Briggs standing on the deck. The smell of alcohol vapor rising, his mind races. If the cargo ignites, we die instantly. The pump is malfunctioning. I can't measure the water level. The hold is unsafe. I have my family aboard. It may be safer to get into the lifeboat for a short time. He does not plan to abandon the ship. He plans to step away temporarily, tow the lifeboat behind the ship, and return once the danger clears. This explains the missing lifeboat, the missing sextant and chronometer, the missing navigation papers, the basics needed to drift safely. The hatches opened for ventilation. This was not an escape, it was a precaution, a temporary evacuation. If Briggs ordered a temporary evacuation, the lifeboat would have been tied to the ship by a rope. This rope, the towline, becomes the center of the tragedy. Several factors could cause it to snap: a wave, sudden wind, increased drag, poorly tied knots due to urgency, damaged rigging. If the rope snapped, the crew would be drifting away while watching their ship moving in the opposite direction. We can imagine the panic in the small boat. Briggs shouting orders, sailors rowing desperately, Sarah protecting little Sophia, the crew trying to close the distance, but the Mary Celeste with full sails would easily outpace a single lifeboat. Slowly, painfully, inevitably, the ship would glide away, until it disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the lifeboat alone, in the middle of the Atlantic. The lifeboat, once separated, had no chance. Small, exposed, vulnerable to waves, unable to catch the wind like a tall ship. Possible outcomes: 1. It capsized during rough water, a single strong wave could overturn it. 2. It drifted for days before starvation or dehydration driven by currents, abandoned to the sea. 3. A squall or winds ripped it apart. Lifeboats were not built for longevity. 4. It sank slowly due to water intake. Wooden boats often fail silently. Whatever the cause, its fate was sealed the moment the rope broke. No survivor, no witness, no trace. Only the drifting Mary Celeste remained. Now, picture the Mary Celeste, unmanned, sails catching the wind, helm unlocked, drifting in wide circles, moving with currents, silent, empty. Days pass. The ship continues forward, a ghost wandering without direction until the Dei Gratia sees her on December 4th. The Mary Celeste arrived safely. Her crew did not. Based on scientific studies, navigation patterns, the ship's condition, the missing items, the open hatches, the lifeboat's absence, the intact cargo, the pump situation. Modern experts overwhelmingly agree that the most likely sequence is this. Alcohol vapors leaked, crew feared explosion, pump malfunction created confusion, Briggs ordered temporary evacuation, lifeboat tied to ship, towline snapped, lifeboat drifted away, crew perished at sea. Mary Celeste continued without them. No violence, no pirates, no conspiracy, no supernatural forces, just a tragic chain of errors that began with a logical decision and ended with an irreversible loss. Perhaps the most heartbreaking truth is this: Briggs was trying to save his family. Every detail suggests he believed they were in temporary danger. The ship was unsafe for a short time. The lifeboat offered momentary safety, a rational fear, a cautious captain, a father. His decision, logical under the circumstances, led to disaster because of one small, fatal variable: a rope that did not hold, a rope that changed history. Once the lifeboat vanished beyond the horizon, their last chapter began. We will never know their final words, their final thoughts, how long they survived, how they faced the ocean's indifference. The Mary Celeste, meanwhile, continued drifting, a mute witness to the tragedy it survived, and the lives it lost. That silence, more than any clue, is why the story haunts us. More than 150 years have passed since the Mary Celeste drifted silently across the Atlantic. Its sails trembling in the wind, its wheel turning without hands, its deck empty, its people gone, and yet the story remains. It has outlived the newspapers that reported it, outlived the sailors who discovered it, outlived the era of wooden ships, outlived the age of empires, outlived the very ocean routes it once sailed. The Mary Celeste endures because it is more than an event. It is an echo, one that refuses to fade. There are many maritime puzzles, many lost ships, many vanished crews, but none have the elements that make the Mary Celeste unique. A seaworthy ship, a missing crew, no sign of struggle, no evidence of disaster, no reasonable explanation, no survivors. A drifting vessel discovered in perfect condition. It is the only case where the ship lived while the people did not. That reversal, the vessel surviving, the humans vanishing, is the heart of its haunting power. In the world of myth and speculation, it is easy to forget the real people lost. Captain Benjamin Briggs, a disciplined, thoughtful, religious man, a sailor who valued caution over risk. Sarah Briggs, a devoted wife, a mother traveling across the world for the first time. Little Sophia, only 2 years old, a child who had her whole life ahead of her. The 7 sailors handpicked by Briggs, skilled men who trusted their captain and trusted the sea. These were not characters in a legend. They were flesh and blood. They had fears, hopes, dreams, routines, jokes, memories. The tragedy of the Mary Celeste is not that the ship was found empty. It is that these 10 lives disappeared without a farewell. The Mary Celeste has been called, cursed, haunted, possessed, doomed, but none of that reflects reality. The ship was not a monster. It was not evil. It did not kill anyone. It was simply a vessel caught in a chain of events far beyond its wooden frame. It carried a tragedy, yes, but it also carried a memory of a crew's final decision, of a father trying to protect his family, of sailors trusting their captain, of human error colliding with the indifference of nature. We return to the Mary Celeste again and again because it is the perfect intersection of fact and imagination, history and myth, science and uncertainty, tragedy and curiosity, fear and beauty, the known and the unknowable. It is a mirror that reflects our fear of vanishing, our desire for answers, our hunger for meaning, our fascination with the sea, our connection to the unresolved. In the end, the Mary Celeste is not a story about ghosts, it is a story about us. The ocean is a place of memory without expression. It sees everything but speaks nothing. The Mary Celeste teaches us this truth. The ocean keeps its secrets, not by choice, not by cruelty, but by nature. Its silence is infinite, its depths unreachable, its mysteries eternal. The crew of the Mary Celeste joined that silence, becoming part of the world the sea hides from us forever. The Mary Celeste influenced maritime safety, modern cargo handling, pump inspection protocols, and lifeboat regulations were improved in part because of the unanswered questions surrounding the case. Literature, the ghost ship trope in horror, adventure, and mystery fiction owes its foundation to the Mary Celeste. Cinema, countless films, both factual and supernatural, borrow imagery directly from the case. The Bermuda Triangle myth writers used the Mary Celeste as a template when shaping the narrative structure of triangle disappearances. Psychology and philosophy, the case is cited when discussing fear of the unknown and the human need for closure. The ship may have vanished into obscurity after its final wreck in 1885, but its legacy only grew louder. The most important legacy is this: the Mary Celeste was almost certainly not the victim of aliens, monsters, curses, paranormal forces. It was likely the victim of something far more human, a misunderstanding, a moment of fear, a logical decision that turned deadly, a lifeboat drifting away, a rope that snapped. A tragedy of human vulnerability, not supernatural terror. The Mary Celeste reminds us that life is fragile. Control is an illusion. Even the wisest can be mistaken. Even the strongest can be lost. The ocean is larger than certainty. Mystery is part of the human experience. The unanswered question is not a failure. It is a reminder. We do not know everything. We cannot know everything. And perhaps we were never meant to. The real Mary Celeste rotted on a reef in 1885, broken by tides and waves. But the story sails on across books, documentaries, classrooms, conversations, imaginations. The ship that drifted alone continues to drift across decades, across cultures, across minds. And as long as humans fear the unknown, as long as the sea remains vast, as long as mysteries remain unsolved, the Mary Celeste will never sink. It is eternal. A ghost only in legend, but alive in memory.